So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's virtual conference. My name is Frazier Martins, and I'm your host for today. Dun & Bradstreet, in association with Applied Cloud Computing and AWS, is glad to present this virtual conference on the pertinent topic, understanding the whys and hows of modernizing Windows workloads in the cloud. Before we begin, I request everyone to please take a moment and go through the guidelines that have been displayed on your screen right now. We encourage you to ask more questions. We request you to please type your queries in the questions section. These will be taken up in the Q&A session. You can also use the chat section for sharing your views. A couple of tips though, we want to know you more. Hence, please mention your name and company name when you post your question. You can also mention the person you are directing your question to. As you can see on your screens, there is a Q&A section and a chat section that will help you converse better with us. Now, there it is, a promising agenda with an eminent lineup of speakers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank everyone for being part of this virtual session today. So, let's kickstart with the opening speaker of the day. I would like to invite Mr. Shubho Pramanik, Senior Vice President, Digitalization for Applied Cloud Computing, to share his insights with us. Welcome, Mr. Pramanik, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I'll take a moment to introduce about myself and about Applied Cloud Computing. So, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome from Applied Cloud Computing. My name is Shubho Pramanik, and I head the digitalization practice at ACC. So we are a born in AWS cloud company with the capabilities in consulting digital cloud and operations, and our core strengths are primarily toward innovation in clouds. We are a team of 200 plus engineers working across 4 different verticals: digitalization, cloud, data lake, and security. So with digitalization, we help customers in terms of building AWS native microservices based on different application and their different business need, which could be like customer acquisition, process automation, or maybe a support. With cloud, we do consulting, assessment, migration, DevOps, and 24/7 NOC support. So that's purely a cloud migration job, and we have a different team who handle that. We also do a data lake where we help our customer in terms of collecting data through various source systems, aggregate them in AWS cloud, build an AI ML algorithm, get an insight of that particular data, and provide a useful data to businesses. Few of the use cases I would like to highlight is that since we work majorly with a lot of BFSI sector, we were able to work with use case like predictive analytics, fraud detection for largest bank on top of data lake. So that's one of the areas where we our expertise. Fourth area is with respect to security. With security, we help our customer in terms of providing them next generation security consulting to help their organization to build cyber resilience from inside and out throughout their application, and we help them monitor and minimize the risk in cloud. So that's a security we provide. I'll say in last 5 years we have assisted India's top five financial institution, media companies in their cloud containerization and big data journey. So that's our core strength. And with respect to our today's topic, and with respect Windows and modernization, I would like to share a couple of more use cases. We did work on 4 different use cases, which are like database data. Like you can actually create your with respect to my SQL Server database. You can customer have shown an interest in terms of like adopting their SQL Server to AWS EC2 Linux. Second is like SQL Server to Amazon Aurora, Aurora with MySQL or Postgre migration. So these are the typical adaptation we have seen with respect to Windows migration. Also, we have seen a traction toward like containerization because .NET because Windows on containers runs and AWS made it available on EKS since last year, and that's leverage a lot of our customer to use containerization. Since last year, we did a lot of case studies on terms of like migrating Windows workload to containers, and since .NET Core have evolved itself, and with the latest .NET Core, we are able to host those things in Linux. So that's also one of the key area where we seen a lot of traction is there. And lastly, like serverless approach. So serverless, lot of customer have shown interest in terms of building serverless microservices toward cloud. So this is the kind of use cases we did Windows migration, and customer have shown interest. So that's our success story. All over to you, Martin. Like Mr. Martin, like that's from my end. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with introducing our speakers for today on the panel. First up, the session will be moderated by Mr. Rahul Datta, Director, PwC India. Thank you, Mr. Datta, for joining us. Our first panelist for the day is Mr. Shubho Pramanik, Senior Vice President, Digitalization, Applied Cloud Computing. Welcome once again, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Pramanik. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Nirad Dwivedi, National Partner Lead, Windows on AWS, Amazon Internet Services Private Limited. Thank you, Mr. Dwivedi, for joining us today. Mr. Pradeep Nadkarni is Head Cloud Solutions for RBL Bank. Thank you, Mr. Nadkarni, for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Welcome you all once again and request you to please come on video if you haven't as yet. And without further ado, let's begin the panel discussion. So over to you, Mr. Datta. Have a very good one.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Martin. So it is indeed a pleasure and nice opportunity to discuss on this particular popular topic of today's world. So digital is the buzzword. Everywhere, every industry, every workload, every footprint, every strategy, every executions are today talking about the digital. Whenever we are thinking about BFSI industries, they are planning to do workloads. They want to do banking, they want to do insurance beyond their boundary of the enterprise. They want to create connected ecosystems. They want to create marketplaces. If I move to retail, they are also thinking in the similar lines, that how to expand the base, how to expand my digital footprints, how to connect the ecosystem together, inside out, outside in. If I go much bigger, all the sectors are facing the challenge of those two-way digital strategy. They are legacy applications, which are stable, which are running safe and sound for last 30 years, and their digital velocity, which are mobile apps, aggregator channels, social media channels, all other workforces, which needs to roll out much faster, which is the demand of the production houses, which are the demands of the marketing houses. They need to come up. So yes, today we are dealing with two different worlds of the workloads, and how to ensure those velocity. Possibly the address of those questions relies on the cloud, because we know that today's cloud world, being it AWS and rest of them, provides plethora of opportunities, solutions, services, products, and instruments, as well as architecture to manage those workloads and all that. With that particular context, we have with us preeminent speaker across the expertise in these vast area of digital transformations and cloud. So without spending a minute on extending these further, let me directly come to the discussion itself. Now, to start with today, Mr. Pradeep, Mr. Pradeep Nathkarni, to shoot the first questions to you, Mr. Pradeep. We have our cloud technologies that is day in and day out revolutionizing enterprise IT infrastructure as well as business capabilities. How that is happening? What is the pace? What is the velocity? What is the momentum as well as what is the strategy? The way it is happening. If you can put forward some lights on that.
Sure. So Rahul, a couple of things have happened with the advent of cloud, right? There has been a complete paradigm shift in the way people are looking at infrastructure. Now, there was a time when you had to have data centers, you had to have your racks, you have to monitor your power cables, everything. All that has gone away with cloud, and it has brought in a lot of flexibility in the way you look at infrastructure. To the extent that infrastructure has become a piece of code, right? That's what cloud gives. Now, this has also come up with a lot of advantages where organizations are able to adopt faster to the digital world, adopt faster to the changes that are happening in the environment around, and also be more pertinent to the customer because the organizations can now fail fast. They don't have to wait too long for a typical infrastructure to be provisioned, then get the code working on it. With so many capabilities that the cloud brings, serverless, with IoT, with analytics and machine learning, a lot of these experimentations are possible. And that's where the organizations are starting to realize benefits, and you see the traction towards cloud adoption that is taking place across the industry.
Yes, Pradeep. So you have nicely articulated about adoptions and emerging technologies, about the placeholders spearheading these particular things. So now, Mr. Neeraj, if we can get your point of view on this particular piece.
Yeah, thanks. So uh, I think it is nicely articulated, and what I would want to add here is uh, when we realize that organizations are changing, there were multiple things which they were evaluating. So there is, I think, very clearly put, we can put a milestone prior to COVID-19 and post COVID-19. So I've been into cloud from almost 15 years, from 2005 onwards. And what I've seen here is significant changes from that time. But post-COVID has changed the complete ecosystem altogether. So I used to interact with very, very large global organizations, whether it is BFSI patch, whether it is manufacturing patch, whether it is consumer durable or any other typical global or Indian multinational organization. They used to have very clear thought process on how they are going to retire their old stack and still keep significant applications still on premise. And they were very clear. I could not tell you. I used to have those board level meetings when I was in a consulting firm, and at various level, I used to see the same scenario. But post COVID, things changed completely. Today, we realize that organizations have become really flexible. They've started testing various things because they realized that things are highly flexible in environment and how they have to reach out to their customers, how they have to reach out to their employees, how they had to enable their employees with various technologies. And as correctly said by the panelist earlier, that in case they are looking at reaching out to people, they need to adapt technologies and fail really fast. And in order to do that, cloud is the best way. There are no strings attached. Start today. And even SMB today, in case you look at not only very, very large, but medium and small organizations as well, for them, using technology as a lever to scaling up to any level is possible. To adapt world-class facilities, to start new applications with the word go, and using it for scaling up has become a norm for majority of organizations. So what I would say is it has become a clear business impacting decision to adapt cloud. And not only organizations are doing it, but they have started using it for their customer engagements perspective as well. So earlier it used to be internal technologies used to be purely on-premise, but now those are on cloud. But even organizations of BFSI patch, which is FS, which is financial sector, has also started looking at cloud very aggressively. So uh, I think.
Absolutely, Mr. Nirad. It's a nice statement that truly no strings attached. It's evolving inside out and outside in. So, Mr. Shubho, if you can also put up some lights about this revolution on towards cloud technologies.
So Mr. Divedi and Ms. Pradeep have actually covered most of it, but I will just like to add a couple of more things. Is that like with respect to COVID, like post-COVID, what we have seen is that like in the initial 2 months of time, the kind of migration we have seen overall the world, you could imagine like a 2 years kind of a migration was done in the 2 months of time, like the April and May, March, those COVID period. And due to a lot of application which are moved to cloud now, what we have seen is that like they have a liberty to use the lot of cloud native services which can be explored, which they couldn't be explored on premises. Now since they are onto cloud, their application are on the AWS ecosystem, they could easily plug and play other services, and that have actually benefited a lot of our customers, and they have that the customer experience is far more better there. So I could say that the continuous improvisation in the architecture of whatever the application a customer is deploying is seen in the cloud, and that couldn't be achieved if that was there in the on-premises.
Yes, Mr. Shubho, absolutely apt. Customer experience is critical. Now, what is coming out evidently that emerging technologies has played a great role in this revolution. So, Mr. Pradeep, my next question to you is that in what ways specifically these advanced technologies like AI, ML, analytics, IoT, other than other emerging technologies and all supporting innovations are helping business becoming scalable, resilient, and agile? What kind of infrastructure is required to support these emerging technologies? Your views on that?
Behind digitalization is to serve the customer better, right? Most of the industries that are prospering today are service industries. You look at the Paytms of the world, the Googles of the world, the Amazons of the world, they thrive on customers, right? And how do you serve the customer better? It's only when you understand the customer better, the customer behaviors, the customer preferences, the customer sentiments. What the customer wants now is more important, right? And what aids in all this? You have the machine learning algorithms which are running in the background that identify what the customer is doing now, and therefore what would the customer be wanting at this point in time, right? 5-10 years back, doing this would mean a lot of investment in infrastructure, in terms of training, in terms of understanding the technologies behind adoption. All of that is crashed into possibly a number of days because of the advent of cloud. Today, any machine learning algorithm that you can think of, or any machine learning platform that you can think of, that provides a lot of these customer insights, is available on cloud. You look at OCR, which at some time used to be, a very complex thing, and you would have people doing specific OCR reading from documents, is available as a simple service today. Facial recognition is available as a service today. Transcription, speech to text, all of these are available as service today. Have SageMaker, which helps you run your machine learning models and aids data scientists run models on it continuously, available as service. So the time that you spend in getting all of these done has reduced drastically, right? Which in effect has improved the way in which enterprises treat customers and be more closer to the customers. So I believe that is what has really helped the adoption of cloud, and also it's helped enterprises in serving the customer better than they used to earlier.
Pretty surely, Pradeep, it's actually optimized, the point you have highlighted. It actually optimizes the workload, the footprints, and time to delivery. Now, Mr. Shubho, if you want to highlight some points all across these emerging technology and their adoption facilitation through cloud.
Sure. What we have seen is AI and ML and blockchain. These are the recent technology, and this will stay for next prolonged period of time. And we have seen that the adaptation in manufacturing, the BFSI, the supply chain, the people engagement and networking kind where we could gather a lot of insights from the application, process it, and as rightly said by Mr. Pradeep, previously to do a simple OCR used to take a lot of time. Right now, being as a developer as myself, I can actually do it within kind of 2 minutes of time with just plug and play, just like putting up an image in Amazon S3, and we can actually see an OCR done. So this is the kind of a leverage cloud give us a leverage in terms of experimenting things without putting much experiment onto it. So when you talk about AI and ML, you typically involve a lot of your data scientist, data engineer, software engineer, DevOps team. Lot of people are involved, and it required a lot of computational power and resources, which I think if you are completely relying on on-prem, it is hardly impossible for now right now. So, and if you compare it with the cloud, you can actually spin up an instance within a 15 minutes of time, go to SageMaker, deploy your services, and you can get the result down. So a very, I'll say cost-effective solution cloud gives you, and this helps not only enterprise, small segment businesses also to take advantage of cloud and to satisfy the customer needs wherever it is needed. Yeah.
Exactly, Mr. Shubho. Cloud plays a big role in the customer satisfaction, running the workload. Now to Mr. Nirad, these overall emerging technology adoption in the cloud, there are aspects of resiliency, scalability, and agility. If you had to put forward some light from your experiences, the way you have seen this adoption.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So what we have realized from our two discussions from Mr. Pradeep and Mr. Shubho is one is more towards the customer side and one is more towards the adoption side. Now we'll take the complete story together. So now in case a customer is looking at adoption, he looks at the complete organization as such. And what is an organization? There are different pieces, various operations and processes, which can be HR, finance, and sales, a customer-facing engine, etc. So everything put together in case you bring all the data in a common platform, which is your internal, your ERP kind of systems, which is some customer-facing, and there might be some extended customer-facing engines as well, which can be a typical channel management system for a large organization or a smaller organization as well, some customer-facing engines. So in case you can bring all the data together, which is your production, your operations, your internal communication, which is your email, and then your operations of HR, etc., then you can have really good decision making happening with a common string of data. Assuming in case there is some production which is required to be ramped up because you're seeing a growth in the sales as well as your channels ecosystem. So this can be immediately be given to the internal team for increasing, looking at getting the production side enhanced. So typically in case there is some bottleneck in the sales cycle, you can easily look at reducing the production cycle. So this can be for very, very large organizations in case they are producing, and even for small organizations so that they can actually look at end-to-end management of data. Now, this is a stage where things are stable. Then you can automate majority of these things using AI, ML, or algorithms, in which you can automate various processes, like your customer-facing engines should automatically get certain outcomes based on certain triggers at the back end. And for security parameters, as Shubho earlier said, there can be risk management in your BFSI organization or a finance. If there is any transaction which is happening, which is kind of observed as a risk transaction, it will be automatically triggering those AI ML algorithms will automatically trigger that there is something wrong with this transaction. It'll create an alert and stop the process there. So what I'm saying is data should not be looked at only from certain lenses. It has to be a combined data lake kind of scenario, and then you can use various algorithms for various engines, finance, customer facing engines, your production engine, your project management team, etc., will all be using these engines to optimize their individual outcomes.
Absolutely, Mr. Nirad. So management of data and automating it is absolutely the key. Now, when you talk about the data, it's all about the workload, the production workload, the operational workload, the transactional workload. Now, my next question is to Mr. Shubho, is about what are some of advantages of modernizing Windows workloads on the cloud by itself? If you can throw some lights there.
Yeah, so one of the I'll say like it is like cost efficiency to remotely access. That is something we can actually see in like adaptation of like Windows workload to cloud, where like a small enterprise to a small business to enterprise can actually operate it more effectively. So that's something I can say it. And uh, you don't have to procure. You just need to simply use software as a services, where many of the services like in the window adaptation, that like as I earlier mentioned, that EKS is Kubernetes service, which was earlier like before like 2019 was not adopted by a lot of Windows partners. But post that we have seen a very keen in terms of like people putting up their Windows workload on EKS, then lot of traction toward the .NET Core because it got enhanced now. Latest .NET 5, .NET Core 5 is something which gives a far more advantage, where you can actually host it on Linux. So this kind of a advantage we have seen in Windows workload adaptation to AWS as a cloud, where a lot of native services like EKS, ECS, and other services can be used there. Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. Shubho. So together we have all realized and understood the necessity of cloud, the role of emerging technologies, and how that ensures adoption in the cloud. Let us move now to the execution piece. Now, my question to Mr. Pradeep, what are those best practices that needs to be considered when it comes to the implementation of an end-to-end cloud adoption?
Sure. So there are some guidelines that you should typically follow when you begin on your cloud journey, right? It's very important to know why you are adopting cloud in the first place, right? So you need to be very clear on why you are adopting cloud, for what purpose you're adopting cloud. The second thing is that you need to be very clear about the blueprint or the landing zone that you're creating for the cloud, because that forms the foundation for your future cloud projects or migrations that you do. Now, when you set these landing zones, certain things happen or follow rather, right? You have to set the security guardrails. You have to identify a cloud policy, right, which is in line with what you're going to do with the cloud, because cloud is so flexible that any misconfiguration can result in a lot of cascading impact. So you have to be very careful about the way you configure cloud, what kind of guardrails you set up, what kind of permissions and privileges you assign to people. And you also need to be very clear about the reference architectures that you're going to follow, so that there is some method to the madness. You don't just allow people to go and randomly create stuff for you. Now, different enterprises in different segments may look at it in a different fashion. For us being in the banking industry and being a regulated industry, we have to be very careful about the way the setups are done. And we have to set those guardrails very carefully, because the guidelines that we have to follow are more stronger, and the compliance levels have to be high, right? You have to be very clear about the SOPs also, because you want to ensure that there is standardization in what you do. One of the most powerful uses of cloud is that you can standardize everything that you do. Everything is a code. You need to just standardize them and keep reusing it. That improves your efficiency and reduces cost. The other key factor that we have experienced, and every other customer who's using cloud I'm sure are following is on cost governance, because it's very easy that the cost goes out of hand. You need to be defining your cost governance models. You need to be setting up your budgets very carefully and raising alerts and all of that. So these are some of the 5, 6 points that you should be very careful about and decide and configure upfront in your cloud journey. That will save you a lot of effort and pain later on.
Very true. So a blueprint should be in place, SOP should be followed, guidelines, security should be maintained. Now moving to Mr. Shubho, if you want to add some other point of views in terms of those best practices.
So Mr. Pradeep have actually covered few of it. Like, and to add to it, I would say like if you need to have your if you're putting your stuff in cloud, then the future visualization need to be put in place in terms of like once things are on cloud, what is your readiness, risk, or opportunity in terms of like moving to cloud, also in terms of like saving cost or optimizing your resources, so that like end-to-end assessment, when we do it, we have to also take a note of all those pointers. Then I would say like we have to it's simply not just a lift and shift journey, where we have to also explore a lot of like IaaS, SaaS, PaaS services, which helps our application to actually use those services and leverage and give us a better experience and better performance in terms of like application which is deployed on cloud. Then like I would say like if you are not an expert, then like partner like us, you can trust us in terms of giving you a better experience, because we have we have a certified a person who can actually help you in terms of like moving your workload to cloud, following all the guidelines which we are doing rigorously for all our customer. So this kind of a trust is there. Then finally, I would say like you should all, if you move to cloud, then the last step is that like you should always have some kind of a monitor and optimize kind of a tool should be there, which will give you more benefit and risk mitigation in terms of moving into cloud. Like that's yeah.
Yes, Mr. Shubho, projections on the cloud, future projections on the workload are pretty critical. Now moving to Mr. Nirad, based on your overall experience on the cloud adoption, what we have seen the kind of best practices and how they get orchestrated in cloud decision making.
Yeah, I think very nicely presented and articulated by Mr. Pradeep and Mr. Shubho. I would like to add a step before this, because once you have decided that you're going on cloud, there are certain ways and processes which you follow and start your journey. But I would like to step a little back, and first I would judge what kind of cloud do I want? What should be my short-term and long-term goal on while going to cloud? So this is just one step before that. In case I'm looking at AWS, I'm looking at the best cloud in terms of what Gartner has kind of put in leaders quadrant way ahead than other clouds for 10 years in a row. And what are the reasons for it? Like from evolving new services, from stability of services, to ease of integration with various platforms, and of course, the roadmap for 5 years to 10 years. All those are basic components and which cloud to choose. So once you're clear on your journey on cloud, then cloud migration is your first step. Normally, migration and modernization is your second step. So first you look at your current workloads to migrate, which is kind of lift and shift and little bit of changes in the surrounding ecosystem for integrations. And then once you have stabilized, then you look at modernizing certain workloads which are either on-premise or you've taken it to cloud, but you feel they're not able to scale up to your needs. Then you look at modernizing things. Once your current workload, which is your current IT, which is there in on-premise, is stabilized, then you should scout all out, looking at various applications which are available with either ISVs as standard in marketplace, or you should start creating your own set of applications like Shubho said, in terms of creating your microservices-based architecture, based application enhancement and new application creation, so that those modules can be reused for creating many more applications and automation in your organization. So it is like a culture which is being created right from starting to understand which cloud to go for, and then choosing the right cloud, and then choosing the journey ahead of your current migration and modernization. This is what you should be looking at.
Absolutely, absolutely. So cloud strategy is very important, being it culture-driven strategy, being it execution-driven strategy. Now to expand these cloud strategy a bit more, if I may request Mr. Pradeep to talk about those specific considerations which will impact a cloud strategy and cloud decision making.
Sure. So some of the key prerequisites to cloud, in my view, and I'm sure the panelists will have their own view about it, is that when you talk about cloud, you should be open to adopting open source technologies, right? Because that's where the power of cloud actually comes in. So you should be very clear about what technologies you want to adopt, and that should be a part of your cloud strategy to know where you want to go and what you want to do. And obviously, like Mr. Neeraj said earlier, your cloud journey could begin with migration with the aim of modernization, right? There are born in cloud companies which start with a modernized setup, and there are companies who are adopting cloud today. They go into migration first and then go into modernization. So depending upon where you stand in this value chain, right? The fintechs are more technology obsessive and they are more technology aware, and therefore they begin with the modernizing journey upfront. Whereas some of the other institutions which have been in play for quite some time, adopting modernization immediately is difficult in that sense. So they start with the migration first and then adoption. And cloud provides a seamless way to do so. For instance, you start your migrating your on-premise loads onto the cloud, start reaping the benefits of cloud, and then you adopt services such as EKS, etc., to start breaking down of these applications into smaller microservices. So you essentially start taking that monolith down into smaller pieces and then put them as microservices and reap the benefits of cloud as well as having achieved your modernization goals. While doing so, there are also a lot of guidelines that different consulting folks have provided. There is this Gartner approach on how do you migrate onto cloud, how do you modernize on cloud. There are security guidelines on the cloud adoption itself, right? There are CIS benchmarks, and then there are NIST benchmarks on how your cloud environment should be. So all of these essentially should form a part of your strategy. So while modernizing is one part, your operational efficiencies, as well as the security, all of them should essentially be baked into the strategy so that you become successful at the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So open source and cloud strategy go hand in hand. So, Mr. Shubho, in terms of your offerings in helping the client towards cloud strategy, a few points you want to mention that you are executing today.
So Mr. Rao, like we follow like the best practices in terms of like whenever we are approaching to cloud, and depending upon our last many years of experience, we follow like one of the typical the most important thing is that like your guys who are actually migrating to the cloud should be certified. So certified cloud solution architect is a mandatory kind of a thing, and any services we leverage, you need to follow their standard best practices, which has been recommended by the cloud service provider. So if you go to any of the services, you can scroll it down in the FAQs. You can browse it there. You can see the best practices, the use cases which has been shared by AWS and many other customers. Like what are there? So you need to consider those things. Certification and standardization is something we do follow, and we do change and adapt as per to our experience. Then like we assess the application in terms of like what technology and what kind of a roadmap it has in terms of a next few years or maybe few months, what the journey is there. So depending on it, we rightly choose the appropriate service whether it can be done as a lift and shift over a virtual machine, or maybe if there is scope for implementing microservices kind of architecture for few of the microservices, we adapt to those kind of a technology and we suggest it to our customers. So it's simply not a lift and shift, but also take a leverage of like of what you can get from the cloud and take a benefit of it. Then the most important thing is that like a data security, data governance, and like the business policy, this you should tighten it up. And there are a lot of methods and tools are there which helps you in assessing those things, and like and it just gives you a confidence in terms of like what all things are there as a checklist you followed or you didn't follow. So there are a lot of tools are there available to it. And I'll say like, then the next thing is like choose right partner in terms of who have done those kind of a successful migration for you. You can trust more toward those kind of the partner. And I mentioned in my previously, like to explore a lot of services in terms of what cloud is offering. So you should also consider that few of the services by which using you are not locking into that particular cloud itself. So in case you are not comfortable, you can switch to one service to another service, but that should be a plan of a company whenever they are actually moving it out. And like so that's we follow, like Mr. Rahul, like yeah.
Absolutely. Cloud partnership is one of the driver for proper cloud decision making. So now we have discussed in detail about the cloud part of the strategy, the cloud part of the execution. Now, if I shift the coin, if we see through the business part of it, what usually goes on in mind of the CXOs in that business, CTOs, CIOs, and everybody, when they are taking decisions about moving workloads to the cloud? Mr. Neera, if you can highlight some of your thoughts here.
Yeah, I would look at it, as you correctly said, again, a little different lens, because once you've established a cloud migration modernization, now you need to go deeper into your own specialization. So in case a segment or an organization like Mr. Pradeep earlier talked about BFSI patch, so they would want certain best practices of their industry to be brought on the table. So you need to identify a partner who's very strong in those certain segments and has understanding of those applications, because once you're migrating or modernizing, there are some disruptions happening in your ecosystem. And in order to optimize while you migrate and modernize, you need to bring out those best practices as well in your organization's applications so that you leverage and get an edge against other organizations. So you might be a leader as well. I'm considering that. But there are smaller organizations who are creating solutions which are much bigger than the leader, and they are able to outpace them because of just the edge in technology which they are able to get. So with this, in case you are just identifying the right partner, like ACC is, for a lot of segments where they're very strong, not only they are migrating a workload or modernizing a workload, but they are including the best practices of that certain industry as well. So they will be guide to you, which you will add that I want those three things in addition to what is there in with my application today, because I see that in other bank or in other manufacturing organization or in other consumer durable organization, but they'll bring that edge that I can add those 5 more which I see or foresee in the industry, which might be happening in coming months or a year. So that is what I think can be summed up from the customer and business impacting perspective.
Excellent. So that's the key. That's the key about partnering and thinking about those pointers in the mind of the business. Now, Mr. Shubho, when you are usually discussing with clients about these workload movement to the cloud, what reflection you see from the business priorities perspective? What they want to achieve across the business level in terms of making cloud decisions overall?
So first thing, when any of our customer look into cloud, they see that how can they minimize their operating costs. So that's the first key area where anyone who want to move to cloud, they look into it. Then the optimization, as I said, like optimizing your lot of services is something they do consider it. Then like I'll say like how what all like we will discuss about the AI and ML services. So those couldn't be achieved. So how those things can be formed, how the data lake can be formed. Like so, all the different key areas where which was not possible can be seen as a future roadmaps whenever any customer is moving on to cloud. If you see like before like 2016 or 15, like a lot of PFSI sectors in India were hesitant to move to cloud. Now that particular transition have changed because we have seen the benefits and kind of you using a lot of AI and ML technology, the kind of benefits we get in cloud is seen. And earlier those datas were used to rely on your back office or on your on premises, which couldn't be explored. But now you can actually create a data lake, and on top of it you can actually leverage it. So those kind of things are discussed whenever any assessment is done toward a moving to cloud. It is not just about moving a single application, but also to take benefits and take advantage of like after you move in, what all things you can actually explore using cloud services. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now, if we go into specifics, when we think about cloud adopters, cloud solution providers, AWS is possibly that name who are surging in the market, who are the front runner in providing cloud services, setting up platforms and all. So my question to Deed, and let me go to Mr. Shuho. So you are doing significant migrations and dealing strategies and execution with the client along with AWS. What's your experience? What kind of benefits you are delivering overall across case studies?
Yeah, sure. So, Mr. Datta, like since our topic is towards like Windows migration, I'll just share my case study about Windows migration.
Right.
In terms of like Windows, we have seen that typically when any of our customer move to cloud, they see how they can actually minimize their licensing cost. As I was earlier expressing ourselves, like a few of our like case study where in terms of like SQL Server database, it was more toward like two use cases. I could rightly say like moving your SQL Server to AWS EC2 Linux, where if your customer if customer is can self manage the SQL Server and can take a leverage of cloud, they can save the licensing cost and the hardware cost there. So that is the one of the adaptation we have seen in customer where they are exploring it, and in case they want to take save the complete licensing cost of Microsoft, then there's another case study is there where you can see a lot of customers are moving from SQL Server to Amazon Aurora, where MySQL and Postgres are considered. I won't say it is just a simple lift and shift and there is no challenge, but after doing the migration, you see a lot of cost benefit by customer in terms of saving the licensing cost, which they has to pay to run SQL Server. So this kind of adaptation we have seen. Also, if you exclude, if you focus on the virtual machine and the containerization, then like exploring the EKS, ECS is something which has been widely used by our customer, where customers run Windows worker nodes on Linux and take advantage of it. And if you use ECS and like the services called as Fargate, then like you can actually like you can run your container without actually provising or maybe managing or maybe scaling it. Like you don't have to think of it. Fargate will do in for you. And after getting .NET Core support, like a lot of customers have adopted to ECS and EKS. This kind of adaptation we have seen with a lot of our customers.
Sure. We have got nice viewpoints, interesting ideas and experiences across the cloud adoption for Windows workloads. We have understood that today, cloud is not a luxury. Cloud is not an option. Cloud is the necessity. Being it operational workload, being it transactional workload, being it reporting workload, being it data workload, every point of time an enterprise at a scale, full or partial, in a complete cloud or hybrid cloud, they have to plan for that particular movement. And those movements is driven by security, movement is driven by best practices with proper SOPs, guidelines, as well as the movement is driven by a proper partner of choice. That is critical because a proper partner relationship ensure the business priorities of migrating workloads, applications all together into a cloud ecosystem with maintaining all the business priorities, uptime, and all other aspects taken into the picture. So with that, let us all move into the question and answer sessions. We have got some questions from the audience. So to pick that up, I want to first invite Mr. Pradeep. The question for you is that when moving any workload to the cloud, what will be the best practices that is being mandated, that is being driven by RBI guidelines?
Sure. So, see, the RBI guidelines are common. So the RBI today has not come out with any specific guideline that talks about cloud. So there is a Gopal Krishna committee report, and there have been different other directives post that which talk about how the application or the platform and the infrastructure should be secured. So some of the key pointers that RBI has very clearly mandated is about privacy of customers, right? Encryption of PII data and how those keys should be managed. So there is very clear direction around that. About the use of TLS encryption end-to-end. So those are some of the other mandates that the regulator has very clearly put forth in terms of encryption of data in transit, encryption of data at rest. Along with that, there are other guidelines around how you should secure your environment, use of right devices, use of right services to ensure that there is very protected environment in terms of people not being able to get inside your system to avoid ransomware, to avoid hacking of any sort. So the regulations per se are common across an on-premise or cloud. It's a matter of how do you interpret those regulations and implement them using cloud services is what matters.
Absolutely, Pradeep. So if I now move to Mr. Nirad, so a question that is being chosen for you is about, we have all understood that migration is a necessity. Moving workloads to the cloud is necessity. But how easy is that to do migrations? And what are the impacts towards cost, towards time, towards velocity, towards business priorities about migrating the workloads to the cloud? What are the impacts?
Yeah, so it is very, very important in case any organization plans their cloud journey. And in order to enhance their experience, in order to reduce the problem areas, there are a lot of tools which we have created. So as AWS, we have created n number of tools across migration and modernization, whether it is workload, whether it is Windows workload to the future latest version of Windows in AWS, or whether it is on-premise legacy application, which is Windows, to out of Windows workload in AWS. So there are tools which are there to support the migration and modernization journey. And in order to enhance the experience, these tools are calibrated in best possible ways to reduce the downtime and the accuracy and efficiency in terms of migration. And also, in case we are looking at modernization, as we are all aware that there might be some hurdles which might be there because of a very old legacy version. So all those are the teething issues which are considered while migrating the data. Though the application is modernized, but the data still needs to be migrated in order to have the same experience for at least the old legacy ecosystem which was earlier running. So it has to be really well calibrated, the whole story of migration and modernization, and the right tools needs to be there to support this journey. And we as a cloud have the most exhaustive number of tools for supporting migrations and modernization journey of any organization, whether it is Windows workload or there is any other workload which is being considered for migration, modernization, or even a fresh application which needs to be started. There are n number of tools for creating those microservices based architecture for any organization.
Sure, Mr. Nirad. Now, let me move to Mr. Shuvo. The question for you is that, what's your experience on implementing multiple cloud implementations? How customization is easy in SaaS kind of application specific to a customer requirement?
Can you repeat that question, Mr. Rahul?
Yeah, so the question is, yeah, sure. So how customization is that easy to do in the cloud environment if there are SaaS kind of application in place as part of the requirement?
Okay, so if you for firstly, like if you are considering customization, then you have to choose the right services. If I just give you an example of like moving your workload to some kind of a SaaS kind of a database, if you are just comparing database, then you need to rightly choose it so that you are not locked into that particular service. If you're unhappy, you can actually move in and move out from it. So that decision you need to take when you are assessing that when you are assessing that particular service, and there are a lot of services out there which can be done, and moving in, moving out. There are as in the earlier discussion, like Mr. Dwivedi said that there are services by which AWS help us in terms of migrating to cloud. So a couple of services like AWS migration service, which helps you in terms of migrating it. There are database migration services out there in terms of which helps you in migrating from one DB to another database. So there are a lot of flexibilities there which clouds provide. So I will say, like, you need to plan very well in terms of like making any changes, and it is quite possible. It is very easy to be done. So you need to well architect your cloud infrastructure whenever you are taking a decision. Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. Shubho. So proper architecture is the key in terms of any customization on top of SaaS platform, adopting infrastructure as a code and other components. So now, as we are almost at the fag end of these discussions today, if you can put forward a summary viewpoint from your end, Mr. Shubho, about today's discussion.
So, Mr. Rao, like, it was a really, I'll say, like, we great, good panelist, and we very healthy discussion about the AWS and cloud adaptation and the Windows workload. I'll say, like, we will discuss majority of the point in terms of assessment, in terms of like how to rightly choose a cloud, in terms of like how flexible cloud it is, and how can you take a leverage of it. So from cost optimization till the architect till the security, we discuss everything. I would say, like, to summarize it, like, you should start with one of your workload to put on cloud, maybe a small workload, and see how it's performed, see its benefits, and take the advantage and make that as a use case to move your further workload to cloud. Be it Windows, Linux, cloud provide all kind of benefits. So you should start exploring cloud, because cloud is the future. So if you are not moving right now, maybe in the future you have to move it. That would be mandatory to the organization. So better to start now than being a late. So you need to rethink your strategy toward that.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Pradeep, we have heard you, a lot of interesting ideas and points. If you can summarize your thoughts overall.
So today we discussed the entire spectrum, right? Starting from why cloud, so how do we migrate, how do we modernize, and then how do we enhance? So we covered the entire life cycle of how the cloud journey goes through, and what is the end state that the customers of cloud can achieve. it was an interesting discussion, and it's been very enlightening to speak with Mr. Nirad and Mr. Shubho. And overall, it was a great discussion to have. Thank you, and well conducted by you, Mr. Rahul. I enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. So going back to Mr. Nirad, if you can summarize with all your views and points which you have provided during the discussion.
Yeah, I think it was really enlightening overall to look at the end customer perspectives and even the service provider perspectives and some OEM perspective altogether. But what I would recommend for every customer to do is to look at first assessing their complete ecosystem, which can be their IT, their operations, processes, and where all they can adapt cloud. So in terms of their own IT, it is very easy. There are a lot of tools which we provide, something like an assessment tool called Ola, which is like optimization and licensing assessment. This is a tool run, and I think this collects the complete IT landscape of an organization. And then once you have the complete IT landscape, then you can look at planning your migration, modernization, and even your future roadmap. Because first is your current IT, and this will also give you insights on how and what to integrate, looking at your current IT as such. Because in many cases, in large organizations, what we have observed as AWS is many organizations don't know what their IT landscape is, how much and what they are utilizing in terms of licenses, in terms of applications, in terms of usage. At times, I've seen in many very large organizations data being given to people who are not needing it anymore. Their roles changed, but still they have access to some confidential data, which is not expected to be there with them. So all those are the kind of things which they should be looking at. And this all starts with assessing their complete IT landscape. And then you can slowly plan your journey for migration and modernization.
Absolutely. So overall, the messaging is very clear. Cloud is no more the future. Cloud is present, and we should go by that. So with that, I want to provide my sincere thanks and gratitude to all my esteemed panelists. And over to you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Datta, for summarizing the entire discussion and for weaving together such a wonderful panel discussion. I'm sure the participating audience had some key takeaways from this discussion. But before we go, it's polling time, so your thoughts matter a lot to us, our participants and all of you. So please gear up for the poll, which is displayed on your screens right now. We're looking forward to your valuable inputs from all our delegates present, so feel free to cast in your polls. It'll be interesting to know what you think about those three questions. There they are. What's the main challenge in IT modernization journey? You've got your four options. Question 2, what is your goal with application modernization? And you have your four options there as well. Question 3, as you scroll down, do you want ACC to connect with you to discuss your IT infrastructure needs? Please go ahead and cast in your polls, dear friends, and we will take it from there very shortly. We can see your polls coming in, your answers coming in. They're getting tallied in the background. We encourage you to go ahead and cast your poll. Come on, friends. We've got quite a number of you in the participant list, and we encourage you to cast in your poll. What's the main challenge in IT modernization journey? What is your goal with application modernization? Do you want ACC to connect with you to discuss your IT infrastructure needs? Lovely. We can see your answers coming in, encouraging you to go ahead and poll. All right. Lovely. So with this, we bring today's virtual conference to a close. Today's session wouldn't have been a success without the active participation of all our esteemed panelists and delegates. I would like to thank each one of you for taking time out and being a part of this virtual conference today. A very special thanks to Applied Cloud Computing and AWS for their support to this initiative, without whom this conference wouldn't have been possible. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. And I always say, we're talking about clouds. My favorite line, keep your feet on the ground and reach for the clouds. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Have a wonderful weekend.